Wait a second. Hello, good morning, everybody. It's 9 o'clock. I hope you're doing well. You had a nice networking dinner yesterday, and you feel fresh and enthusiasm about our session today. My name is Sabine Geisler. I'm from the German SDI Coordination Office, which is located in Frankfurt. Today, our thematic session is named Continuous Support to Implementation. You see the speakers over there. We will have a small change due to that the third speaker has to catch the airplane in time. He has to start with the presentations. So you see there a wrong name. We have actually Joaquim Pinto da Costa, who is presenting how the Portuguese Environmental Agency optimizes investments in its spatial data infrastructure. Please, Joaquim.
Where is it? Sorry. No. Escape. So I have to find it here. Okay. Is it? Okay. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Everybody's wake about. Have a nice dinner yesterday. So I'm Joaquim Pinto Costa. I'm responsible for the IT in the Portuguese Environmental Agency. And our agency, I imagine like most of them, of the others in Europe, collects information about the environment, analyze it, and somehow to promote public policies and public actions to promote sustainable environment, circular economy, etc. Actually, I need to tell you a little bit about the story of our SDI, because this present APA has about 5 years now. So the infrastructure I'm going to talk to you about is about 5 years. And 5 years ago, I don't know if you remember, there was a financial crisis in Portugal. And actually, the Presence Environmental Agency was the merge of 9 organizations. So we came up with a huge organization, but huge, at least for the Portuguese scale, of initially about 1,000 people. The merge included one big national authority, national water authority, a big national environmental authority that took care about the other subjects like air quality and stuff like that, because they didn't have water, and 5 regional authorities. So what did I inherit in terms of systems was a complete puzzle. As you see there, we got lots of legacy systems. We got lots of redundant systems in terms of functionality, in terms of technology. In terms of SDIs alone, you see there some of them that were there. And at the time, of course, we had a financial crisis. We didn't have much money to invest, so we had to do systems that were at least 5 times bigger with 1/3 of the budget. So mainly what we did was just try to choose the best ones and go from there. And the chosen one in terms of SDI was that one, SNIG, at the upper left corner. And we decided to choose that one to evolve, and still today is the present SDI. Of course, the other thing we had to do is try to organize our minds in terms of how we going to group these systems. And I used to say, well, we tried to organize this in some kind of ecosystem. So we just see, well, for instance, we have operational systems. And when I say operational systems, it's systems that have to collect operational data, like people have to submit to movements of wastes or things like that. So, or things related to water or emissions. Sorry, it's in Portuguese there. Then we also operate environmental monitoring networks for water, like about 1,000 stations or gauging stations. That means quantity and quality. Also air quality stations, and also the radiological stations. So there'll be a environmental monitoring ecosystem. And then we got all the kinds of systems related to analytics, and where I put in some terms the SDI, but of course these ecosystems communicate with each other. And We tried to consolidate all these, and in the end, because we need this, because we have lots of reporting obligations to, not only to the ministry, to other public authorities in Portugal, also to IONET. APA alone has to submit about 1,000 envelopes of information in IONET. So we are very keen and like very much the idea of streamlined reporting, e-reporting, because this actually is a big burden on our operations. And also this is somehow still a bit legacy. If you see there on the bottom of the corner, this tends to be, we have reporting obligations that usually report things that happened previous year, because you're not collecting some things in real time. People have environmental obligations to report what they did with waste, what they did with water, or whatever they report us in the first trimester, so that we report to the National Statistical Authority, then reports to Eurostat, and then we report to IONET, etc. So this is, we report, you know, we're continuously reporting. It takes a lot of time. So this is why we need an SDI. And this is what also causes that people turn in peaks. You see those graphics there. This is the waste submissions, waste movement submissions, and people in the first, you know, week of the year just, you know, they have till Wednesday. Then it keeps growing like a wave, and in the end, in the last week of the trimester, the last week of March, it's the complete peak. So this makes no sense at all in these times, and it's more or less what happens with our systems, and we had to prepare them to have a huge load in the last week of March, and we try to change that to make more this machine to machine and distribute this all over the year. That's, well, where would this, talking more specifically about our infrastructure, of our SDI, special infrastructure. What this translates in terms of infrastructure is I have to publish about, well, this was great, I can say, 5 years later we have all these things consolidated, enough bragging, but this eventually bites us, because since we concentrate every SDI, everything, every task in a small, you know, only one system with a small group of people, of course, we now have a system that has about 150 geographic services published. I don't know if people, maybe some people operate bigger ones, but operate this on a single server, or even if you have a cluster architecture, you run into trouble. The system becomes a bit unstable. I'll explain this later, this becomes to be really unstable, and you, of course, you have tools to monitor and see if things are going right, but the old ways, we use traditional tools, traditional IT tools. We analyze logs to get some indicators, see if it's up or down, but this is tedious. An IT guy never analyzes the logs except for forensic purposes of some boss orders him to do. We don't like to do that. But sometimes you have to do, you need some indicators, and you have to analyze log by hand. This is very tedious. The old times, you're just also monitoring the system with typical IT tools, measures, etc. But that gives the system is up or down, but if it's some problem with a geographic service, you really don't know about it. So we moved to a specific, last year in Barcelona, we talked with Spatineo, we had this need for a more dedicated tool to geographic service and start monitoring our service with Spatineo. Spatineo allows us to monitor the availability of the services and also monitoring Spark conformance and generate automated reports, etc. We were using this for about 6 months, and we already got some rather interesting results, I think. Because previously we didn't get, it was almost impossible to get this. Here what you see is we were able to classify, and we never were able to do that before, the service by usage, by request. This is about 6 months of data, although we'd adjusted all the logs since initial of January, but there was a gap in the logs. So this meant about 6 months of logs of our SDI. And we see, for instance, one question now is Inspired's conference, are Inspired services more popular than non-Inspired, just plain OGC services? Well, in these 6 months, no. Actually, the most popular one was with air quality on Inspired services, about 2,000 requests. And on non-Inspired service, you have water bodies for Water Framework Directive, and they have almost 3 times, or more than 3 times the number of requests. Also, you see the ones that are more requested than others. And this goes on. We have 150. Until services, almost no one requests at all. So also see where our requests came from. And actually, it was funny to see that accessible beaches is that logo in the middle. It's beaches that have infrastructures to get people with handicaps to the water was requested from all over the world, and it was quite popular. It was interesting to see. What did this allowed us to do is to identifying outliers and abuses. We are analyzing the data and saw, well, suddenly we had about 500,000 hits in about, what's this? It was about beaches, but well, okay, Portugal beaches are very popular, but that popular. And then we we analyzed the services from them and said, well, this happened in 14 hours. There was a guy that was bombing us with 120 requests per second, and we know why, and then it stopped. Of course, now what we do in this case is just block him, and otherwise we didn't even see him, and you will prejudicate other users of the infrastructure. So, identifying these most popular services, datasets, feature types allows us to optimize the infrastructure and got a real grasp what people were really interested in, and this was very important for us. Talking about optimizing, I don't know if any of you operate ArcGIS servers-based infrastructures, but as someone told me one of these days, a colleague here, he said that the magic number of ArcSoc, a very demanding process in the server, is the 250, about 250, more than 250 process of ArcSoc. It just crashes the server. What we were getting using default values of configuration was that at about almost 200 process, the servers became unstable. It didn't really knew very well. You weren't able to publish service, this continued to operate, but you didn't know very well, and you didn't have the data to fine-tune this. With this data in mind, what we did, we just configured the number of instances, the number of times the instance is up. And we just reduced the process from almost 200 processes to 75, as you see there, sometimes on 100, and the servers became stable. Anyway, we are going to upgrade these servers, and we also have, so this is our present infrastructure. There's a database server. This uses ArcGIS server, but the rest is pretty agnostic. We use Linux servers for databases and Postgres, and we use other things. And we are moving towards more and more towards open source software, operating systems, etc. But the present infrastructure, well, is quite big. And now we have the task: are we going to evolve this? Now, in terms of computational power, we have about 16 CPUs. 70 gigabytes of RAM, 5.5 terabytes of storage. I imagine probably some people here who operate bigger infrastructures. I know a few. How many people here operate SDI infrastructures? Can you raise your hands just to see? 1, 2, okay. Maybe some of these things you experienced them already. So now the big question for me, I'm more an IT guy. Well, how do I going to evolve this? I have a cluster, it's not running so well, it would be better to have just one machine. So we use this software also, this service from Spatial. Yesterday, actually, we finished this actually. We just prepared 2 machines. Ezra told me, well, run ArcGIS servers on Linux or Windows is the same. And what he did was just this. Made 2 equal machines, used the old database, and I was very, very keen, well, I should move to Linux. Linux will be better. So I prepared a machine with CentOS, another just version with Windows, but unfortunately, the Windows one operated better. And this gives me, well, of course, I'm going to insist on these tests, but probably won't be now that I will change from my servers from Windows to Linux, but apparently the Windows one performs much better, but I'll do some features tests. This was very usual for me, it will be very usual in the future. So, about the conclusion. As I said, nobody wants to analyze logs. Analyze logs, it's awful. People hate it. But actually, if you spend hundreds of thousands of euros in SDIs and spend thousands of hours, spend, well, like a few percentages of that in analyzing your logs, establish a baseline, for data usage, system performance, it pays off in the end, actually. Of course, you have to be forced to do that. Something happens, like in our case, servers become unstable, you have some incentive to do it. But don't wait till the end. Get some resources into do it. And that, as you know, monitoring is an integral part of the Inspire implementation. There's a guidance document that says that Inspire service should be monitored and get indicators for its usage, and the monitor indicates something like 10 requests per hour or something like that. So you need some kind of software implementation to do that and automation. Knowing better the kind of service that people use allows you to link this to strategical or political objectives. Well, is this the beaches are more requested than something? Did you want to promote this? So this gives you a grasp of what your infrastructure is used for, because sometimes I feel that we like a lot and we are very proud of infrastructure in terms of technology and all that, but is it used for what? And that sometimes is failing an answer. And as the Drucker said, if you can measure it, you can manage it. And use this monitoring information in this decision process. It pays off in the end. So that's about it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Joachim, giving us an overview for the SDI system in Portugal, the new one. I think we still have time for maybe one or two questions. Is there anybody who wants to have some details? The microphone is coming.
Nathalie Delattre from Belgium. Thank you for this interesting presentation. I have a question about the use of Spatineo. Do you use this Spatineo for oh, sorry, this is morning. For checking the compliancy with Inspire for the services, or is it just for monitoring purpose?
Well, it has that functionality also, and it's useful sometimes for us, but actually we also run the official validators and all that before publishing it. But he has that functionality also, yes.
Okay, and what did you think about, or is it...
Well, I think it worked. It's not really... Conformance to Inspire, not really my specialty. I have a team. I forgot to tell. Of course, this work is. I'm responsible for the IT team, but it's lots of persons working here, even from the management board that give us support. But I think that it works. The conformance with Inspire, the Inspire Directive service and analysis, because actually what they do is they check the GML and see. But I don't know if it's as exhaustive as the official validators, but I think there's a tandem of Spatineo that we could ask, and probably should explain you better than me how they check the compliance with the Inspire services.
Okay, thank you.
Any other short question? Okay, thanks, Joachim.
Thank you very much, all.
Have a good trip home. For those who arrived later, we took Joachim's presentation at the beginning because he has to catch the plane. So now we are in the correct order. Alexandra Fonseca is presenting a study on data policies in the Portuguese public administration in the context of SNIG. Please.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I'm sorry you have to listen to me twice, but I had to replace my colleague that couldn't present the next one. So I'm going to start with this presentation, which is on data policy an issue that is very important at the moment for us for the national SDI. So this presentation will present this study, which is an overview, which includes an overview of the legal framework and best practices for data and service sharing at the national and international level, and with a special focus on open data practices, and performed also, and this is one of the major interests that we had, a survey on the present situation of SNIG entities in what concerns their data policies. So SNIG, as you probably know, is the Portuguese National Spatial Data Infrastructure, which is available on the internet since 1995. I include here some screenshots of the infrastructure and the URL. Ever since INSPIRE entered into force in 2007, major efforts have been developed in Portugal to promote INSPIRE implementation activities, mainly related with organizational and operational structure, setting up the INSPIRE networks, focal point networks, the metadata managers, thematic working groups, and so on. Also, dissemination and capacity building was another of the activities that were promoted. Of course, metadata creation and compliance, and the INSPIRE monitoring and reporting that we have to perform every year. So here we have the identification of the major steps that occurred since SNIG creation, which was already created a long time ago, and different phases occurred with different political and operational approaches to the development of SNIG, some better, some worse, but this is our evolution, and the initiatives and this data policy investment that we are doing now is associated with the approach that is being followed since 2015 here, with the creation of this SNIG 2020 vision that we are following now for the National Spatial Data Infrastructure. So this vision was created through a collaborative process that involved lots of people from the GI community, from the focal point networks, and the document was produced and approved in SNIG steering committee, and this is the document that is like orienting the new developments on SNIG. And in this document, one of the main issues that is referred is that a spatial data infrastructure is based on an open data policy, ensuring the free of cost sharing of geographic information produced by public administration entities. So with this motivation, we started to this study that is a study on data policies in public administration that is going to support the discussion that is going to be launched and already was launched in the steering committee to allow us to define a data policy for SNIG that help us to promote the access to geographic information through the SCI. This study included these main components: legal instruments on one side, the review of the legal instruments, then also a review on data sharing good practices, and the identification of SNIG situation in terms of data policies. Here we identify, I'm sorry, the names of the directives and the legal instruments are in Portuguese, but what we did was we reviewed the different directives that are related either to to the access to data information, like INSPIRE, the reuse of public sector information, the legal protection of databases directive, the harmonization of intellectual property rights, and the protection of individuals' personal data. So all the transposition documents that transposed all these directives were also analyzed, because all these documents are important to assess how things and interconnect the different main areas related to the access to data information. Also, other directives more related with access to environmental information, the marine directive and others, also the Copernicus, were also reviewed and analyzed according to their relationships either to INSPIRE, to the directive hours on the access to environmental information, and the PSI. We also identified numerous legal instruments related to the access and review of and reuse of information referring to environmental reporting obligations, which is one of the tasks that now we are investing lots of effort within the working groups to identify which data is related with the priority data for environmental reporting. And so this was what we have reviewed in this study, referring to the legal instruments. On the other hand, we also reviewed the data sharing good practices, the data sharing and access. We performed an overview of the different concepts related with data sharing and access, the definitions. We identified good examples in accessing and sharing geographic data at the international and national levels, and also focused on the importance of the new open data initiatives, as this is one of our goals to discuss at the steering committee. From that overview of good practices, we identified the key points that we can use either to classify the different initiatives we reviewed, and they are stated here as in terms of coordination, the framework agreements, the transparency, licenses, charging mechanisms, public access, emergency and use, third-party data. So considering these key points from the review we made, we analyzed these different initiatives. We have here like a screen table where we have classified them, where these initiatives were stronger in terms of those key points, and also reviewed some of these open data initiatives to get knowledge on that for us. Based on these reviews, we prepared a questionnaire that was launched to an online survey on data sharing policies that was filled by the different SNIG network, core network entities, and I will show quickly some of the results that we identified with this survey. So from the SNIG entities network that answered to the questionnaire, we could identify that only 53% of the entities answered and claimed to have a data policy, but only a small percentage have a document that characterized that policy. Even we had some contacts with some of the entities, and they said that only in that time they were thinking which was their data policy. They didn't, and sometimes they didn't realize what was really, if they really had a data policy, or if it was like something that was not really defined. The vast majority of entities identified as the fundamental key point the establishment of agreements, and within the establishment of agreements, collaboration protocols was the most frequently identified type of agreement. Then we also analyzed the frequency with which the geographic information is generally made available to third parties according to the type of users. So it is frequent to make GI available to public entities. There are still entities that never make information available to the general public. The availability of geographic information to companies, both public and private, is practiced by almost half of the entities on a frequent basis, and the availability to the research centers is made more occasionally. The free availability with use license is the most frequent way in terms of conditions of access that was referred by the entities, and for 38% of the entities it is frequent to sell geographic information. Also, we analyzed according the frequency of GI made available according to the conditions of access to public entities, to the different types of users, and we find out that there is a greater frequency of availability of GI to public entities for free. Availability for the general public is preferably done openly without registration. Research centers geographic information to research centers is more often available by agreement or is openly. For public companies, frequently occur GI availability, both open and free of charge, as well as through selling. And for private companies, it is more often sold, the information. Also, we asked for in terms of average time of provision of geographic information, and 1 of 5 working days was the main answer. And we also checked that still the entities are not yet using a lot of web services. So it's not still a common procedure, and this is one of the information we also had from the monitoring indicators of INSPIRE. SNIG entities also mentioned several difficulties in accessing to specific data sets and services from other public entities, and referred the high costs and also problems in identifying or interpreting the applicable data policies. Here we identified also in the survey which were the most referred INSPIRE Annex themes, so we have here identified which were. And for conclusions, we could say that there are still many barriers to efficient information sharing in public administration in Portugal. This study on legal instruments and good practices on data service and sharing under the INSPIRE Directive has made possible to have an overview of the situation in terms of international and national terms. And the online survey identified that the SNIG entities still do not have a strong and clear definition of their data policies, so it's some issue where we have to invest, because national spatial data infrastructure depends on that the kind of definition. And we, as mentioned, the key points most referred by for an effective sharing and access of geographic information are the establishment of agreements and bilateral protocols. This is the present situation. The sale of geographic information among public entities is very frequent, so this is another issue that has to be discussed on SNIG steering committee, because it makes no sense, this kind of situation, the critical situation of the spatial data services. And in general, the entities agree that it is necessary to create a specific legal basis for public administration in Portugal, establishing a simplified agreement for the sharing of geographic information. So in terms of next steps, what are we going to do? So based on this study, SNIG data policy strategy discussion is going to be followed and concluded. The idea also to define and adopt a data sharing license template for SNIG is another thing that is going to be discussed. Our entities in the SNIG network are going to be updating the data policy fields in SNIG metadata catalog, and we also want to perform additionally, to help also the discussion, a survey on geographic information sales revenue, because we consider it can be an important input for the discussion of SNIG policies at SNIG. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. You were really fast. I couldn't believe before, because of the amount of slides. Maybe you can rest a little bit while we are looking for questions in the audience.
Good morning. Thank you for the very good presentation. My name is Gabriele Giannini from the European Commission, DG Agriculture. I would just would like to know if among the public administration that were included in this study, there is the Ministry of Agriculture as well. Thank you.
Yes, from our SNIG network, we have at least one public institute that is responsible, but it's mainly for, it's from the Ministry of Agriculture, but it's mainly related with the soils data. I'm not sure if it includes also specific, but maybe, yes, maybe it also has information more related with agriculture. Yes.
Anybody else? Okay, so we stay in Portugal. Alexandra, if you are ready,
Yeah.
you can go on, please, with the presentation regarding new developments on the Portuguese National Spatial Data Infrastructure and Inspire implementation. Please.
Thank you very much again. I was not supposed to be the one that would make this presentation, but I'm here now representing the SNIG Inspire team. I have here other colleagues, which are part of the National Agency for the Territory, the public institute that is responsible for the coordination of the National Spatial Data Infrastructure and for the implementation of Inspire in Portugal. So I already referred the SNIG. I mentioned here we have some screens of the catalog and the visualizer. So the goal of this presentation, we have been participating in this conference in other years. Our idea was to present the new developments on SNIG and Inspire since more or less last year. These developments were raised due to a diagnosis study that we made in 2015 and also related with the already mentioned SNIG 2020 vision document that was created through those participative and collaborative processes where we involved the main actors in the geographic information community. So, in what concerns this 2015 diagnosis that was made, we considered on one side the Inspire monitoring indicators. So we analyzed the different monitoring indicators we had for our Inspire data since the beginning, and we identified which was our situation. And of course, one of the issues that is related also with the problems with data policy was that we have we had at that time a low number of services. Also, we performed a SWOT analysis with the public entities of the SNIG network, and this SWOT analysis could identify as major preoccupations and issues the lack of human resources, the lack of some financial resources, of course, and the need of more capacity building initiatives. And on the other hand, we performed in 2015 also an online public consultation to the GI community, which had a good reception. So we had around 500 answers, and through this online public consultation, we could identify that our national spatial data infrastructure was not used as we would like, and it would be important to identify why was this happening. So, on the other hand, what we considered to identify the new developments of SNIG was also the results of the SNIG 2020 vision and the corresponding action plan that was then defined according to what the vision produced. So in terms of vision, the main pillars that were identified for this SNIG 2020 vision was to invest in open data, in interoperable data, to simplify the way data is discovered, to empower the GI community in terms of awareness and training, to create open tools to enhance geographic information interoperability and exploitation, and also to invest in the articulation with the e-government. On the other side, it was considered very important to articulate the national STI with the local, regional, and international and thematic STIs, and finally to have ways to explore the STI to provide a better knowledge on the territory through the access to geographic information, to promote the information society, and to allow to address societal challenging while attributes to sustainable development. So here we listed the main developments we have been investing in 2016-2017. We had to perform I am going to speak only about some of them. We had to perform a revision of our legislation, also because we had problems with the transposition, but at the same time we made other changes. We invested in dynamizing SNIG Inspire network and working groups. We performed a new approach to Inspire monitoring process, a new way to collect and provide the data to the European Commission. Of course, we had this SNIG data policy study, which I presented in the previous presentation. We are working on this articulation with other SDIs, namely some thematic SDIs, where we already have the harvesting process working. Also, we did lots of capacity building initiatives directed to the people that are involved in the groups and in the networks. We are starting now the renovation of SNIG GeoPortal. I'm going to speak about some of these activities that reflect what which SNIG developments are being done. So in terms of legislation, the new diploma, of course our diploma, we had the SNIG diploma since 1990, and then it was altered with the transposition of the directive in 2009, and then with different changes after that. But recently, this last change that produced a new document made some amendments to answer the requirements of the European Commission in terms of transposition, namely to include the Inspire annexes that we didn't include in the diploma. We were remitting to the directive, and also to make more explicit some metadata characteristics. But we also made we included some other articles in the legislation in order to allow a better articulation of the national spatial infrastructure with the thematic, regional or local SDIs, and also to guarantee that those SDIs when are articulated with SNIG are also answering to Inspire requirements. And we expanded the steering committee because we thought that this steering committee gets stronger if it includes all the geographical data producers that are obliged by Inspire obligations. The other activity that has been performed was the dynamization of SNIG Inspire networks and the working groups, and we aligned our thematic working groups with Inspire clusters. We promote within the groups the development of the spatial data services, and we can think that this was very good results because the number of services increased a lot in this new monitoring that we submitted this year. Working groups are investing in the identification of priority data sets for reporting, and also the transversal working group has produced lots of different documents to support, namely related with the Inspire ID, to the Atom download services, to metadata for interoperable SDIs. Here we have an overview of the work that is being developed in the working group, the thematic working groups that are now investing a lot in the harmonization of data. And also in the priority data sets for e-reporting. The other activity I'm going to mention here was the changes that we performed in the Inspire monitoring process. So significant changes were introduced in this process, because now the monitoring is performed directly through the SNIG catalog, which didn't occur in the previous years. So the records of SNIG catalog that include the keyword Inspire Core are the ones that are going to be reported to the European Commission. An application to allow the collection of the data directly from the SNIG metadata using this keyword was developed, and then the harvesting process from SNIG GeoPortal was performed through this keyword. This new approach was already used in this 2016-17 submission. and we did not use the usual forms. And this allowed to improve the consistency between the monitoring indicators and the metadata published in the Inspire Geo portal, simplify the reporting process, and improve metadata quality. And we need to mention that the success of this new monitoring process was only possible due to the effort and commitment of the different entities that had to invest a lot to change their metadata to allow this kind of approach. The study on data policies, which I already mentioned, and that is going to be discussed in the SNIG strategy committee, and of course what I already mentioned is define the model of a template for SNIG, and also to perform the survey on revenue of GI cells. Finally, another initiative that is been one of the other investments that we did this year, these 2 years, was we did several sessions on and events on related to geographic information, SDI and Inspire, workshops at our institution involving the different entities, and this year we are going to have the Iberian event in Lisbon. This year is going to be in Lisbon, GDI-DE 2017, which is an important event that puts together people from Portugal and Spain around SDI and Inspire issues. And we created last year a national annual event on SDI, SNIG, which is going to be, again, which is going to be close to GDI-DE. And it's an important also event on spatial data infrastructures. Next steps, so SNIG, as I mentioned, SNIG Geo portal is going to be changed till beginning this year. The main changes are going to be associated with migrating the existing platform to a solution based on an open source technology. Also, new functionalities are going to be created, and the existing ones are going to be improved. The platform design is going to be renewed also to fulfill one of the SNIG 2020 wishes, that was to make it more dynamic, functional, intuitive, and friendly for both citizens and professional users, and also some other aspects of that are going to be considered, like the visualization in different devices, and monitoring the services and the usage statistics. Some of the functionalities, like 2 different access points, are going to be created, one public geoportal and the other for specific metadata registers, the formal that metadata catalog, the official, the use of virtual catalogs to facilitate search, like for different categories of searching, the support to multiple reference systems, and also the possibility of producing thematic maps based on attribute tables. I think it's this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. We heard now a lot about Portugal, and there is quite big changes in the area around. So I think it's very interesting to see how processes are reviewed, and that you probably will come to a big success soon. Are there questions regarding maybe also the other presentation you had before?
First of all, congratulations for the work, which is quite impressive. You were speaking of a lack of resources, so I have a specific questions. I would like to know what is the consortium behind all this project, and the number of persons really involved in all this. Have you? Yes.
Well, I think for the work that supports the networks and all the developments of Inspire and SNIG, at our institution we are more or less 12 people, around 12, 15 people, no more, or even less, 10 maybe. It's the co-authors of this paper. Then several of the institutions, we are trying through SNIG steering committee in some situations also to spread some of the effort through the other institutions that are also stronger, like the Environmental Agency that presented before. So when some aspects are stronger in those institutions, we discuss that in the SNIG steering committee and try to spread that effort also through the institutions. But we are just this this number.
Any more questions from the audience? If not from the audience, I will have to put a question. That's my job. Regarding the Inspire monitoring process, you mentioned that you set up this automated process beginning 2015, I guess.
No, this automated process was performed for this monitoring this year.
Have you thought about using the European dashboard, which you can also use for automated monitoring?
We thought about it, but at the moment, I think Enrique can answer better. But
we think that there could be some errors at the time because it's not official. It's the tool. So we made a small application that processes the metadata, the whole metadata for Inspire, and creates a list of indicators. It's an XSLT process run in the XML SPI, and create that table of indicators.
And then you put it into IONET and transfer it to XML.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, but of course, if things we can evolve to the other approach as soon as to use the dashboard.
Yeah. Well, I know that some states are already using it, so I was just curious if you thought about using it or why you maybe have not used it. But you're right; it was probably a little bit still in development.
Yeah.
So
we discussed
you were not safe to use it.
Yes, and we were able to validate our results with the entities. It was a process. It was a better process for us, a more interactive, like that.
Involve more the entities at this phase.
Okay.
Probably next
Because
year
it was necessary to the entities to make a great effort to put all in the metadata right. So it was a kind of interactive process.
Okay, thank you. There's another question over there. I would say it's the last question.
Good morning. I would like to ask, what is the legal entity of your agency? In which ministry does it belong? And how many employees are working?
So the agency that is responsible for SNIG. So it belongs to the Ministry of the Environment. And we are at global, not related specifically with the Inspire and National STI coordination. We are more or less 200 people, I think, not more.
And what other competencies do you have?
DGT, yes. DGT is like the National Institute of Reference for Geographic Information, so is responsible also for the cadastral, for the geodesic network, and it produces also some cartography. On the other side, it recently, in 2012, there was a merge of this institute with the Land Use Planning Agency. So now it also has the competences related with coordinating the process and the political process of municipal master plans and other interventions in the territory in land use planning.
And how many they're working on the Inspire?
How many?
How many employees are devoted for the Inspire implementation and monitoring?
Well, apart from this group that is the co-authoring this paper, this presentation, we have people from the different departments, either from the cartographic production and from the land use planning, but it's not very significant in terms of number. I would add some more, like 7 people from the other departments that are involved in the groups that are working on data harmonization and that are so more related with implementing Inspire and not in the coordination and promoting activities.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, especially to Portugal being present for 3 for 3 presentations actually. For those who have not been here, we had the presentation from Joachim and his colleague, this was his name, Fabio Bittencourt, already at 9 o'clock because he had to catch the plane. So now we are in the schedule again, in the order that is mentioned in the program. We are now switching to Spain. We are still on the Iberian Peninsula. And Ruben Bejar, welcome, is now talking about the support for vector tiles in Inspire View Surface. Please, Ruben.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. My name is Rubén Bejar. I come from University of Saragossa in Spain, and we have been working with our national mapping agency, IGN Spain, since the beginning of the Spanish SDI. And I'm going to present you the initial steps we are giving towards the use of vector tiles in Inspire View services. I will explain briefly what are vector tiles and the difference with raster tiles. I will defend that they belong to view services, not to download services, in spite of containing vector data. And I will propose some small changes to the technical guidance for Inspire View services, which we think that would be more than enough to deploy view services with vector tiles compliant with Inspire. And finally, I will provide some tips that we are discovering when trying the different technologies and components for supporting vector tiles on your own map services. Vector tiles, a vector representation of geographic data, which covers a spatially contiguous and rectangular extent. You probably are all used to raster tiles. They have been the standard thing for fast, quick map services on the web for the last years. Vector tiles are similar to raster tiles. They partition a map in small, equally sized pieces at fixed scales to provide support for fast map services. They contribute towards these services being fast thanks to their fixed scales, small sizes. They can be very optimized, and they make profit from caching at the server side, at the client side. So they are thought for being fast, and vector tiles have most of those same properties. This is a quick depiction of the setup you need to serve raster tiles. This is quite common. It has been done for many years. You have geographic data. You have some service, some map server, which transforms that to a styled raster map. A raster map in the sense of an image with a geographical style. Then you divide that map into equally sized rectangular pieces at fixed scales, and then serve those tiles in an image format, usually PNG or JPG, to the client applications, web applications, or mobile applications. Vector tiles are also different from raster tiles. Of course, they are not pre-styled images of the geographic information. They are vector representations that can be manipulated client-side. This means that the users can, for instance, change easily the styles, the geographical styles, the symbols of the maps. But they have other advantages too. For instance, they can look better in high-resolution displays, in these large monitors and high-resolution monitors. They can offer more interactivity than raster tiles. For instance, you can have so-called map tips. You can move the mouse around the map and you have instant reaction, giving you some information about what is under the pointer, or you can highlight features as the mouse crosses over them. So you can do different things that are very difficult or even impossible with raster tiles. This is the setup that you would need, simplified of course, to serve vector tiles. You can see the difference. You have the geographic data and your map server, but you produced a non-styled, visualization-oriented vector map that you divide in vector tiles. The formats are different. You are not using image formats. You are not using PNG or JPG. You are using, or JPG. You are using, for instance, the Mapbox vector tile format and for PDF, which is binary encoding. And you serve those vector tiles to the client applications where they can, the users or the final users can, for instance, change the styles. We think that from the point of view of the web service, vector tiles and raster tiles are almost the same thing. This is from the point of view of the web service. You have a file in a certain format that, after being requested, is sent to the client application. So they can be served through the same interfaces, for instance, WMTS, just encoded in a different format. Vector tiles contain vector data, so one can think that they belong to view, to download services and not to view services. I think that even if they are vector in nature, they are thought and they are designed to be used to visualization. They are a representation of your data that is intended only for visualization, simplified, cropped, mixed, whatever. Okay, you are not providing a download service in disguise. You are providing really a view service based on vector representation of the data. The technical guidance for the implementation of Inspire View services provides recommendations and guidelines for Inspire View services. Of course, it defines Inspire profiles of the Webmap Service 1.3.0. It's the ISO standard and the OGC standard, and also for the OGC Webmap Tile service. It also provides some suggestions for the WMS-C profile, which is essentially outdated today, but the suggestions are still there. This technical guidance can be changed slightly to accommodate vector services. We think that the changes would be really small. This is, of course, a draft. The technical groups are discussing these things right now, but the changes would be just 2 or 3. For the first one is in the implementation related to the formats. Of course, if you have vector tiles, you cannot use the same formats for the files. So besides supporting PNG or GIF format, you should have to support probably MVT, GeoJSON, or TopoJSON. I will talk a little bit more about the different formats for vector tiles later. The format just needs to be expressed in a proper way, so this has to include it also in the technical guidance. It's a technicality if you want. And now there is another rule that needs to be read properly. I mean that in the current state, the view services can provide layers in different styles. You have to give names for those styles. Okay, this doesn't make much sense with vector tiles because styles are client thing. Users can't change them. So just maybe this needs to be read properly. If you are saying that a certain style requires certain property or attribute in the data set, the guidance should say that this attribute is there, that the client can change the style, the color, the symbols, or whatever on their own. The technical guidance is a server-side thing. It does not take into consideration client applications. Finally, the final issue is the legends. The web map services provide legends of the layers they are serving. Of course, the legend depends on the symbolization, on the colors, on the styles, but again, this is a thing that the users in the client applications can change when using vector tiles, so the recommendation would just be not including this optional element in services for layers which are vector tiles. And that would be more or less all that needs to be changed to have Inspire compliant view services use vector tiles. And to end the presentation, I just want to give some quick tips on implementation of support for vector tiles. These things that we have learned in the process of trying the different technologies and formats which are now these days available for serving vector tiles. There are several formats for vector tiles in use. GeoJSON, TopoJSON are in use, but the Mapbox vector tile specification is these days the de facto standard. It is an open specification, so our suggestion is that you go for that and don't think it twice. There are at least 3 service interfaces that can be considered to serve map tiles today: raster or vector tiles, WMTS, TMS, and XYZ. Which the Inspire profile, there is an Inspire profile of the WMTS in the technical guidance. XYZ is probably the most common, is what Mapbox or Google Maps are using, so probably the technical guideline should take that into consideration. TMS and XYZ are very similar to each other, they just change the order of parameters and a few other things, but the changes are very small. WMTS is a little bit more different than the other two, but XYZ is the most common, at least outside Inspire, and probably we should be looking outside and considering that. For the map viewers, you need map styles. Okay, when you create a map server and you serve your data sets with your styles, you style them at your office and you set up the map service, and that's all. But in this case, you will need to create map styles that can be understood and processed by the client applications. You can create, for example, them with Maputnik, which is a free style editor for maps. It's readily available. The presentation, and there are several links when this presentation is available in the web page of the conference. You can click on them and get more information, of course. Maputnik is a free style editor for maps. That uses vector tiles as a source, requires an XYZ server. I said it is the most common interface, or a tile.json file, which is a description of a tile set that again by default follows the XYZ scheme too. Not every client application library is yet compatible with the style files created with Maputnik. Maputnik follows the Mapbox style specification, which is again an open specification for styling vector tiles. In our tests so far, I didn't write that in the presentation because it's something which we are still trying. OpenLayers 4 with a plugin has some support, but not perfect. Leaflet, if you know the library to create web map applications, Leaflet has a plugin with good support for this. And of course, there is the Mapbox GLJS library, which is perfect support because it comes from the people who developed the specification. And finally, we have set up a quick prototype with some data from the Spanish National Mapping Agency and 2 different style definitions, just to test the capabilities of the clients, the libraries, and the servers. The client right now uses the Mapbox GLJS, and the server is T-Rex, which is an interesting project, very focused on vector tiles, and which is properly maintained and actively developed. So I suggest you that you can give it a try. GeoServer, for instance, already has some support for vector tiles. Indeed, it is good support. The only problem is that it does not support, at least out of the box, the XYZ interface. So for the current version of the prototype, we are using T-Rex, but probably in the end we will end up using GeoServer because that is used in IGN in Spain for many other things. You can also try that. The links should be working. Okay, if you have any suggestions, besides asking me, of course, Emilio Lopez, which is here, raise your hand, don't be shy, is a co-author of this work and a member of the technical subgroup of the maintenance and implementation group. So he's one of the people working with the technical guidance for view services that I've mentioned before. He's here, so you can ask him or suggest him whatever you think. And that will be all. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ruben, and also Emilio. You were participating. So if I understood you correctly, you don't want to answer the questions, but Emilio should do that.
That would be very nice.
Okay, so who has some questions here in that corner? You always have to run first to that side.
Thank you for all the presentation. I've already used the prototype and it's pretty interesting, so thank you for that also. I had one question. Have you considered also the three-dimensional data in your vector?
Not yet. That's the quick answer. I think vector tiles can provide some technical support for 3D data, better than raster tiles, of course, but we have not made anything with 3D data yet. And I don't know if the IGN has... No.
Okay.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry, there's another question at the other end.
Thank you. Very interesting presentation. I have one question. You told that the presentation is done by the client. Is there some kind of standardization by the clients which can be used from more than one client, maybe?
Yes, the Mapbox style specification. There is this link right here. You follow that, and there is a specification of how to create styles for the client that can be used in different libraries. It's quite extensive, and they provide a client library that you can use right now, but there are other implementations, so it is basically a de facto standard for this.
Any more questions? Oh yeah, there's another one.
A tile set of vector tiles is probably produced for one spatial reference system. Is it possible to transform that on client side?
I think that would be a problem.
Okay.
Unless the change is very small, the reprojection of data would make the tiles that do not match. So in this situation, they are more similar to raster tiles than to other things.
Okay. So for each spatial reference system, separate.
You need to recreate the vector tiles
Okay.
if you need different projection systems.
Oh, thanks.
Emilio?
But in our experience, we know that the 90-95% of the requests to our services, webmaster services, is using Google Maps compatible. So it's not a big problem. The 90% of our users are using Google Maps compatible reference system.
Okay, I think we need to stop here. Thanks again for the presentation from Spain. So now we have one country left. I would like to ask Katja Werle on the floor for Germany, coming from the SDI Coordination Office, and talking about the GDI-DE coordinative challenges from a federal to a common vision of inspire datasets. Katja,
Yeah.
please.
Thank you, Sabine, and welcome everybody. Well, I'm here to tell you about the coordinative challenges we are facing in the SDI Germany, the so-called GDI-DE. Yeah, the problem of federal structures we are dealing with is probably nothing new for you. Maybe I should ask before, who of you is working in a federal state for an SDI? Okay. Yeah, so I think you know these problems very good, but I want to tell you now how we try to get a common vision of inspired datasets in federal states like Germany. Yeah, or maybe it's more interesting for you which ideas we have and with which methods we used to get this common vision of inspired datasets. Yeah, as we already heard in the opening plenary, the key word for the Inspire implementation is cooperation. Inspire tries to get one homogeneous view of datasets instead of 28 different ones. So in Europe we have all to work together to achieve this goal. And this challenge we have at the European level can be transferred to Germany itself because of the federal structure. And we have to work in Germany across all administrative levels to get this spatial coverage all over Germany. Yeah, so we have this one Inspire directive that enabled the legal basis for our national SDI, but in fact we have 17 national laws, one for the federation and 16 for the 16 federal states, and as well as law enforcement down to the municipalities. So what does this mean for the coordinative structure of Germany? So we have 17 contact points, and if we have a closer look on the federal level, they are organized in even more administrative levels. So that means that we have multiple data owners even at federal state level. And the average per state is about 40 data providers up to 278. Because they are usually at the lowest level of administration. But these data owners are the only ones who are authorized to assess the Inspire relevance of datasets. So in the federation level, we have 34 data providers, and there you can see the data owners are at every administrative level we have. So what we should try to do now is to get a common understanding of Inspire-affected datasets to get the spatial coverage all over Germany. So for this purpose, in 2014, we established a national action plan that you can see here. And the action I will focus on is the 1.2, a common view of Inspire-affected datasets, and consequently 1.3, identify and close these thematic gaps we get from the action before. And these both actions are in the first section, provide spatial data as efficiently and homogeneously as possible for Inspire. So what have we done so far? Our first approach was to build a professional network with all parties from all administrative levels involved. And this platform was and is still used for each Inspire theme for the exchange of thematic profiles. They are like short data specifications in German, and to show us the successfully implementations we already have, then to list the professional members for each specific data theme, then FAQs, and to list all the Inspire-affected data themes. And as a result, we listed more than 300 generalized data themes that could be Inspire affected. And as I told you before, the data owners are the only ones who are authorized to assess the Inspire relevance. And we already identified that the opinions of the data owners are quite different. So we started a survey to get an overview of all the spatial data that actually exist and which of them are Inspire affected. And all 17 contact points asked every of the data owners to fill a table for each of the 300 listed data sets. And they asked them about the data owner, the data model, to match them with the Inspire theme, about the legal basis, if the data is already monitored, and then if they think if this data is Inspire affected. Yeah, here you can see the first survey after about 2 years. We get these results in June this year. And on the left side, you can see how many datasets are affected from the point of view of the federal states. And on the right side, the point of view of the federation. And how you can see for the federal states, for almost half of the listed datasets, the federal states weren't quite sure about the Inspire relevance. Yeah, this can have multiple reasons. But yeah, anyway, this survey is a really good overview because all data, all federal states and the federation have estimated the Inspire relevance, and this is really helpful. The states can compare the different opinions, maybe determine a central data provider, and their tendencies of the Inspire relevance of each of the data sets that can be derived. So as you can see in the small extract there from the table, the Inspire relevance differs from state to state for these selected data sets, and there's no tendency apparent. So for example, the rail network, the Schienennetz, for 5 federal states say yes, we have this data set, we are responsible for that, and we think it is Inspire relevant, but 5 say no, and 6 doesn't know it exactly. Maybe the reason that they think this data set has to be provided from the federation, for example. Yeah, so how can we solve this problem? What we do now is we cooperate with the German conferences of specialized ministers to get the assessment from a higher level. And each of these 20 conferences have thematic working committees with members from all the federal states. So what we did already was to map all the listed data to the conferences and the thematic working committees. And currently, they estimate the Inspire relevance of their respective data sets so that the data owners can be requested after that to provide the appropriate data. Yeah, and we think this solution works. You can see an example here. It's an extract from the table as well, and it shows the first effects. The cadastral parcels here, the Flurstücke, you can see the data model, then the Inspire theme to the cadastral parcels, and you can see the German conferences, and it's an Innenministerkonferenz and the working theme. And they already estimated the Inspire relevance, and as you can see here, all of the states followed this estimation. So we are looking forward to get this common view of each data set in the federal state of Germany. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Katja. I think you showed us that it's very complicated to go through. And we can see that there are several countries, what we have heard in these conferences, who have set up action plans. So also we are struggling in Germany with this. Questions? Yes, please.
Yes, first, congratulations for the work done, and it was very impressive. I thought that Belgium was a complicated country, but I discovered that Germany is not so bad at this point. I just one question. Did you have difficulties to involve the ministers? And if yes, are there teams that are more complicated, more difficult than others?
Yeah, we had some difficulties. We tried already, I think, for 1.5 years to build a network with all these conferences. And yeah, in fact, we don't have the cooperation with all of them, but we still try.
Yes, please.
Would you like to tell us about the open data in Germany, the debate behind it and the rationale, and also what the strategy about open data?
I think that's a big question. Yeah, maybe we should talk about it later. I don't know if I can say so much in 5 minutes now.
Is there maybe anybody else from the audience who likes to answer this question?
Not in 5 minutes. Well, there is in fact a struggle. The federal government started to open the data to the public and follows open data principles, and the federal states, they follow their own policies. Some do provide open data, some do not. Some considered and do not open. So in fact, we now have a situation that is more complicated than before. Before we had at least a uniform system for charges, and now we have some parts that do open data and some that do not. And even with the open data, we have different standards for the licenses. So, not to say that the open data really now have made access easier. At the moment, it's perhaps, if you consider all Germany, even more complicated, which is a challenge for the SDI because we have to make the system transparent.
Have you elaborated a certain strategy for the next years at the federal level?
The federal level is pushing. So they have issued laws trying to catch the states. They even push money to the states, which works in some aspect, but the federal government now focuses first on the e-government. And perhaps Inspire and Geodata comes next, but first priority has e-government.
Yeah, also we're going away from your presentation, sorry, but only one aspect, because you asked for the strategy. The federal government passed a law, an open data law, and the states committed to this law. So they have to follow open data principles. This is an issue in each state, but as Andreas said, the implementation and the understanding of open data is still an issue. But there is a strategy, like we try to have a legal framework, and at least everybody has to follow open data, and I would say there's at least a tendency to open data, which you can really see.
We maybe have time for one more question to Katja before we close the session.
Yes, I think it was a very inspiring presentation for other countries with a similar administrative structure. So, but I have two questions. So it's clearly part of your activities, of your work, to coordinate the work of the different states. But I was wondering, is it also a clear element of your mission, of your competencies that you have to do at federal level on one hand? On the other hand, are you also recognized from the beginning, or took it a lot of time to be recognized in that role by the different states? or it's still a process that is maybe more difficult than it seems now?
Yeah, I think it's a long process. I showed you already one good example where it works, but we are still working on it, and I think it will be a long process to get the real vision of a common understanding for each data set. And as I told you, that the municipalities, usually the data owner, is the only one who is authorized to assess the INSPIRE relevance. So I think in some cases we can't achieve this goal.
And then do you also receive your funding? So your budget is part of that funding really devoted to coordinating the work? Or is it just something you do because it has to be done? So it's really part of your mission, obligations, or how should I see it?
Yeah, I would say so, yeah, of course.
Yeah, maybe I should add that the SDI Coordination Office is financed by the state and the federal state and the states itself to make exactly this kind of coordination work in Germany. Okay, I think we have made it on time and you're all keen to get some coffee. So thank you very much to all presenters and to the audience being here and sharing your ideas. I wish you a nice Friday afternoon or morning still.